Watch the wheels. They just retracted, and the moment they did, this train stopped touching the ground entirely. It's now floating, riding on nothing but magnetic force, at 603 kilometers an hour. That's not just a fast train, it's the fastest thing on wheels, or in this case, on no wheels at all, that has ever run on land. Japan has spent 60 years building toward this moment, and most people outside the country have never even heard of it. 86% of this railway runs straight through solid mountain rock, because there simply wasn't another way to build it. The project started with a $9 billion budget. It's now at $72 billion, and climbing. Engineers have drilled 246 kilometers of tunnel through some of the hardest geology in Japan. The rock fought back. The schedule collapsed more than once. The cost exploded years ahead of projections, and they kept building anyway. Somewhere inside this train, a component sits colder than the vacuum of outer space, and that's precisely what makes it fly. At one point, a single regional governor's signature froze this $72 billion project for 4 straight years. This is the story of how Japan built the fastest machine to ever run on solid ground, and why the whole thing nearly never happened at all. Rewind to 1964. Japan launches the original bullet train, the Shinkansen, and changes rail travel worldwide overnight. Almost immediately, planners start asking the obvious next question: what comes after this? By the later 20th century, the answer became urgent. The Tokaido Shinkansen line connecting Tokyo and Osaka was running 12 trains an hour and had essentially hit its ceiling. There was no more room to squeeze additional capacity out of the existing corridor. Japan needed an entirely new route, not an upgrade. The existing coastal line solves that problem by curving around the mountain ranges between the two cities. The new plan does the opposite. It goes straight through them, and the physics behind how to do that safely at extreme speed had actually been under study since 1962, decades before a single tunnel was ever approved. It would ultimately take 63 years to turn those early theoretical equations into an operating railway. The first real test came in 1977, a 7-kilometer experimental track built in Miyazaki, on Japan's southern coast. This is where the concept first left the whiteboard. Here, engineers achieved the first genuine levitation of a full-size test vehicle, confirming that superconducting magnets could actually hold a train off the rail rather than just theorize about it. Miyazaki proved the core physics worked. The next challenge was scaling that idea up to cross an entire mountain range, the Japanese Alps. Geological surveys of the Alps route began in 1990, and it took 19 years of continuous survey work before a single tunnel was formally approved for construction. That caution wasn't bureaucratic overcaution. It was necessity. The rock beneath the Southern Alps is roughly 300 million years old and behaves unlike anything engineers had tunneled through before. Up to 1,400 meters of solid overburden pressing down, active fault zones, underground rivers running through the rock, and pressure intense enough to crush steel supports. Before committing to the full 286-kilometer line, engineers built the Yamanashi test track, 18.4 kilometers of genuine maglev railway, constructed purely to prove every system at real scale before betting billions on the real thing. Tunneling here relied on the new Austrian tunneling method: drill, blast, clear the debris, apply shotcrete, install rock bolts, then repeat the entire cycle. 11 kilometers of test tunnel were driven this way, with each full blast cycle taking around 6 hours, run daily until the tunnel was complete. Ahead of the main excavation, a smaller pilot tunnel was bored first, specifically to sample the rock conditions before the primary machine committed to a section, an early warning system built directly into the construction process. The guideway itself, the structure the train actually rides along, had to hold millimeter-level accuracy across kilometers of track, verified section by section with laser surveys. Embedded into both walls of that guideway are what are called figure-8 coils. a single coil design responsible simultaneously for levitation, lateral guidance, and propulsion all at once. That detail matters more than it sounds. The train's motor isn't inside the train at all. It's built into the track itself. Across the full 18 kilometers of test guideway, that meant installing the equivalent of an 18-kilometer-long electric motor directly into concrete, along with kilometers of cable runs, with every coil powered and every sensor wired and verified before a single train ever moved. Because the propulsion system needs variable frequency electrical power unlike a conventional train, a dedicated substation was built purely to supply it, feeding into a control center capable of monitoring every coil, every sensor, and the exact position of the train down to fractions of a second, simultaneously. The first test vehicle arrived in 1995, a capsule with no visible wheels and no overhead power line, built from the outset to float rather than roll. Every established rule of conventional railway engineering simply didn't apply to it. Genuine levitation was achieved in 1997. The support tires retracted, and the vehicle rose roughly 10 centimeters, suspended entirely on invisible magnetic force. By December of that year, it had already reached 531 kilometers an hour, a new world record set on essentially its first attempt at full speed. Before a single paying passenger ever set foot on a commercial version of this train, roughly 200,000 members of the public were given rides on the test vehicle. Japan didn't just test the engineering, it tested public trust in the engineering too. Ground broke on the actual Chuo Shinkansen line in October 2014, at 286 kilometers total, with 246 of those kilometers running through tunnel. It instantly became the largest railway construction project in history, connecting Shinagawa in Tokyo to Nagoya. One of the strangest engineering challenges came right at the start. The new underground station in Tokyo had to be built directly beneath an existing, fully operational bullet train station, without ever stopping trains running above it. Engineers began with diaphragm walls, continuous concrete retaining walls built before any excavation started underneath, allowing crews to dig 40 meters beneath a live railway station in the middle of Tokyo without causing a single delay to service overhead. To bore through this ground, a tunnel boring machine was assembled entirely underground because it was simply too large to be lowered into the shaft in one piece. It went down component by component instead. Once assembled, the finished machine measured 14 meters wide, 150 meters long, and weighed roughly 4,000 tons, cutting with 80 tungsten carbide disc cutters on its face. It advanced through dense urban ground at around 15 meters per day, while homes, shops, and pedestrians directly overhead felt essentially nothing. Every 90 minutes, the machine installed one complete concrete ring made of 6 segments, roughly 600 rings for every kilometer of tunnel. Excavated soil traveled 5 kilometers by conveyor belt to the surface before being trucked away for disposal, a process that ran continuously, day and night. Once the tunnel boring machine left the city and reached the Alps, urban soil gave way to alpine rock, and the machine's pace immediately slowed. Its disc cutters wore down every 50 meters and had to be replaced, which meant sending workers into a pressurized chamber directly at the tunnel face, widely regarded as one of the more dangerous jobs in modern construction. To reduce that risk, engineers pioneered a technique unique to this project: boring a pilot survey tunnel up to 1,000 meters ahead of the main machine, essentially reading the geology in advance before the primary bore ever committed to a section. Even with that warning system, the geology in the Alps eventually failed the plan outright. The schist rock here, roughly 300 million years old, badly fractured, and unpredictable, didn't behave like any existing geological model. Engineers were forced into an emergency redesign, abandoning the tunnel boring machine in the worst sections in favor of the older New Austrian tunneling method instead. That decision alone triggered a 5-year delay announcement. Napna in the Alps was slower and considerably more expensive, but it was the only method the rock would actually tolerate. With up to 1,400 meters of mountain pressing down overhead, rock pressure in places was strong enough to crush a conventional tunnel like a vise. Where that pressure peaked, engineers layered in steel arch ribs, followed by shotcrete, followed by rock bolts, followed by additional shotcrete, a repeated reinforcement sequence built specifically to withstand it. Underground rivers encountered deep in the rock were grouted shut and drained rather than simply worked around. In the end, 3 completely different tunneling methods were used across this single project: NOTAM, TBM shield boring, and conventional drill and blast, with the geology itself dictating every switch between them. At points, crews were pumping 10,000 liters of water per minute out of the Southern Alps tunnel section, every single minute of active construction. Even the excavated alpine rock wasn't wasted. It was crushed on site and reused as aggregate in the tunnel's own concrete lining. That in-situ lining, poured directly behind the advancing excavation, was placed in 12-meter sections, with each section taking roughly 3 days to fully cure. Vertical shafts up to 400 meters deep were sunk through the mountain purely for ventilation and emergency access, and the entire project ran across 60. With tunneling complete in a given section, the genuinely hardest phase began: installing the guideway itself to millimeter accuracy across kilometers of track. Every section was laser surveyed, with a tolerance of just 1 millimeter over 50 meters, and 0 exceptions permitted anywhere along the line. Recessed into the guideway walls are the coils that make levitation possible. The train floats by interacting with these coils magnetically, never physically touching them. Across the full length of the line, roughly 580,000 individual coils were installed into the guideway, each one positioned by hand. It's worth repeating, because it's the single strangest fact about this entire railway. The engine isn't in the train. It's built into 246 kilometers of concrete guideway instead. The nose of the train stretches roughly 15 meters and took 3 years of dedicated wind tunnel testing to finalize, purely because entering a tunnel at up to 500 kilometers an hour generates a violent pressure wave, one that the nose shape has to manage without damaging the tunnel or the train. Inside each of the train's magnets, niobium titanium wire thinner than a human hair is wound roughly 50,000 times, all inside a vacuum environment. That coil sits inside a cryostat, essentially a thermos flask the size of a small car, that keeps the magnet at just 4 degrees above absolute zero. Liquid helium loaded at -269 degrees Celsius, colder than the surface of Pluto, is what makes the magnet superconducting in the first place. Each train carries 32 of these superconducting magnets, and every single one has to be installed, cooled, and independently verified before the next is brought online. Below 160 kilometers an hour, the train runs on conventional rubber tires, exactly like an ordinary vehicle. Above that threshold, the tires retract automatically, and the train transitions to floating on magnetic force. Because entering a tunnel at up to 500 kilometers an hour compresses the air violently enough to affect passengers physically, a dedicated cabin pressure system exists purely to prevent ear discomfort and damage. Step inside, though, and none of this is visible. The cabin looks like any other high-speed train. Every piece of the engineering that makes this vehicle extraordinary is deliberately hidden from the people riding it. 1,200 sensors run on each train, continuously reporting every system status and any anomaly back to the central control room in real time. Every new test began at walking pace, with every sensor and system checked before any real speed was applied. At 160 kilometers an hour, the tires retract and the train rises. Engineers in the control center watch the levitation sensors confirm a clean transition before moving further. Each subsequent test pushed faster than the last: 200, 300, 400, 500 kilometers an hour, with the data at each stage confirming what the underlying physics had predicted all along. Not every test went perfectly. At 400 kilometers an hour, One of the magnets quenched, lost its superconducting state, and the safety systems brought the train to a safe stop immediately. Investigation traced it to track vibration, affecting the magnet mounting. Engineers redesigned the mounting, retested, and confirmed no repeat of the issue. Problem identified, problem solved. Engineers also ran full earthquake simulations